So this is part 2 of our law of cosines notes. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, make sure to watch that first. It's law of cosines, finding sides. So today we're going to do the second page of these notes, which are going to help us find the angles. So you'll notice here, we already have our first page filled out, but here are the 3 ways this could be set up for a triangle with vertices A, B, and C. Keeping in mind that our lowercase letters represent sides, our uppercase letters represent angles or vertices, and we're going to use that today to help us find the side of a triangle, the angle of a triangle when the triangle is not a right triangle. All right, so again, all the items in your book already have these labeled, but it's not a bad idea to practice this so that we understand where sides are located. So our goal today is to find the measure of an angle. Given that, so this is the situation when we have all 3 sides. So side A, which is located opposite of vertex A, is 5. So this side here is 5. Side B is located opposite of vertex B. So that means this side over here is 11. And lastly, side C is opposite of vertex C, which means this side over here is 8. So you'll be given that in your homework. Next, our goal is to pick what one of the 3 laws of cosines that we need. Since we're trying to find angle B, that's the one we're going to use. So I'm going to go up here and borrow that. All right, then we're going to fill it in. Now the steps to finish this out are going to be different than when we found sides because we're trying to get big B by itself. Luckily, with the finding sides, the item you need by itself is pretty much already on its own. So there are a few more steps involved when we're trying to find angles. But first, just like with the other, we are going to substitute. So we fill in what we know. So B is 11. Actually, let me go ahead and use my magnifying glass so you can see where I'm putting this. That 11 is squared. It is equal to side A squared, so 5 squared, plus side C squared, which is our 8, minus 2 times, and then we're going to go ahead and use side A and C again. So that's a 5 and an 8. Times the cosine, and this is the part we don't know, so we're just going to go ahead and leave it as big B. So there we are. First step is still just to substitute what we know. However, now we're going to start a process of trying to get B by itself, big B. So before I start moving items, we're going to do some calculations. So calculation number 1, 11 squared. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate this piece here, 11 squared, which is 121. And we're going to do this in a manner that allows us to kind of set up the pieces that we're going to move as we get B by itself. Next, we're going to go ahead and take 5 squared plus 8 squared. And that result is 89. Then we're going to evaluate this portion that precedes the cosine, that it's times. So we're going to take a negative 2 times 5 times 8. And that gives us a negative 80. And that is still times cosine B. All right, so based on order of operations, we cannot combine 89 and negative 80 together because the 80 is being multiplied to cosine. So as we start moving things to the other side, those two pieces have to go separately. So now we're going to focus in on moving our 89 to the left. So I'm going to subtract 89 from both sides. On the right, we should still have the minus 80 times cosine b remaining. And that is equal to 121 minus 89, which is 32. Next, we're going to keep working toward getting everything by itself. So we're going to leave the cosine b there, and we're going to divide out, because that's the inverse of multiplying. We're going to divide out this negative 80. Now this is when things can start getting a little messy, because not all of these fractions are going to simplify very kindly. Feel free to simplify the fraction if you'd like, but you could just leave it as 32 divided by negative 80. It's not going to hurt to enter that in the calculator in that way. All right, so since I'm kind of running out of room there, I'm going to go ahead and scooch over here. So we have 32 divided by a negative 80, which I'm just going to leave as that. And on the right side, all that's left now is cosine b. Now, as we have done with all of these triangles and solving for angles, the inverse of cosine or any trig function is that trig function to the negative 1. So what we're going to do to get b completely by itself is we're going to do the cosine inverse of each side. And that's going to be what we end up entering into our calculator. So that's what I'm going to put on my calculator here in a second. This should take us all the way down to the value of b, which is going to be approximation. So let me go ahead and change my equal sign to the approximately equal sign. So I'm going to swap over to my Desmos. I haven't exited it out, however, from the previous video. However, just to make sure, it does like to reset, so I am going to go ahead and go in and reselect degrees to make sure I'm in the right mode. We want to do the cosine inverse, which is under the functions tab over here on the right. So the cosine inverse of 32 divided by a negative 80. And we should get that our angle measure is 113.58 degrees. And that is how you find a missing angle when you know all three sides of a triangle that is not a right triangle using the law of cosines. All right, so again, like I stated before, if you want to pause now, work through example 4, and then once you have yours completed, if you want to go ahead and play the video then to see if you've done it right, power to you. In this particular one, they've marked where they would like you to find the missing value. Sometimes it's marked that way. Sometimes they just give you the vertice. But I'm going to go ahead and label my sides. So A is 30, which is over here. Side B is 45, which is located here. Side C is 23, which is located here. Again, since we're finding side B, sorry for using the same one this whole time, we're going to go ahead and use that same version of our law of cosines to start our substitution step. All right, so first we're going to go ahead and substitute in 45. It is squared. That equals a squared, which is 30, plus c squared, which is 23, minus 2 times a, so bringing it again, 30, times c, bringing that in again, 23, times the cosine. And if you want, since they've literally written x in, you can go ahead and write this as an x if you'd like instead of the big B. All right, so since we know we're finding a side, we're going to go ahead and evaluate these in 3 steps. So 45 squared is 2,025. That equals 30 squared plus 23 squared, which is 1,429. Minus, we're going to go 2 times 30 times 23, which is 1,380. And then last but not least, still times the cosine of x. All right, so we have chosen which law of cosines we're going to use. We have substituted our sides in accordingly. We have evaluated our 3 chunks so that we can start moving items away from the x so that we can solve for its value. So first, we move this 1429, so we're going to subtract it to the other side. That should give you 596, which equals this negative 1,380 times the cosine of x. Then we divide. Again, you could simplify that fraction. You can, it's up to you. Doesn't take much to do. However, we're going to go ahead and just take the cosine inverse of the whole thing here in a second anyway. So if you want to leave it, you can. So we have this fraction equal to the cosine of x. So last but not least, we're going to do the inverse of each side. So at this particular point, that's the cosine inverse, or cosine to the negative 1. And that's what we'll enter into our Desmos. So I'm going to switch over to that. We have the cosine inverse. I'm going to go to the function, hit cosine inverse of 596 divided by a negative 1,380. And we should get an angle of 115.59. And that is how we solve